I value moralities for the value term on the resolution, which is defined as use expressed due to moral obligation by minimum Westwood standards, minimizing oppression. 1. Oppression is bad for equality. Inclusion is a prerequisite for moral theories that can be justified by the public. 2. Structural balance is based on moral exclusion, which is allowed because exclusion is not based on zero, but rather on balance, which remain no one. Recognize structural balance questions. The privilege of the unconscious formula, so the listening to oppressed and visible outside inclusion, anything can be fostered. Structural balance is not inevitable. We become forward despite the same structure, which peak balance can also be used to empower citizens and reduce to 3 theories that can account for the reality we live in. Fails normative guides action for early 07. Normative theorizing must be integrated with empirical reality. Side 9, ideal consideration must be taken seriously when deriving principle of justice. If the implement a theory would not result in increase in justice, then it fails. Theories falsification philosophy can determine the best conditions. Philosophy should not critically reflect the attitude concerning what is realistically possible. Egalitarian theory cannot address the trade-offs that inevitably rise. Plain text: the United States criminal justice system will encourage jury nullification to be used to acquit defendants in the face of perceived injustice for nonviolent crimes. Parameter 07, Supreme Court has admitted the jury has the power to disregard law courts that threaten accurate verdict. The judge could strike juries even after deliberation has begun. Advocates have been arrested. Solutions from the jury has power to acquit technically guilty defendants protected by the Fifth Amendment. Contention 1 is the police state. The finale is nearest. Police forces exterminate disposable population. Government officials bend their ears to the impulses of corporate America. As the effects of overcriminalization, private prisons, surveillance become palpable, and as the militarized state engineers deception and discrimination, demoralizing the masses, challenge the bureaucratic apparatus. Jury nullification is a reminder that we, the people, are the government. This is the counter-revolution from within. Whitehead 15. In the face of injustice, hard to feel power. The government always wins. Conceive pointless. How do you push back against police state, but also launch counter-revolution using nonviolent means? You nullify everything the government does that is illegitimately or blatantly unconstitutional. Ordinary citizens, not the officials, should have the final say in the world of implementation and the nullification acts of the check. Laws should reflect conservative citizenry as a place of propaganda in corporate America. Punishment really fits crimes. Money that directly say this is where nullification is critical to reject. Extreme sentences counteract the proper-driven lean in Asia, which officials are treated with leniency while the average citizen prosecuted both. Send nullification power reminder that we, the people, are the government, and our counter-revolution uses reform and criticism simultaneously to create a strategy of dual power. The state is inevitable. The question is how to use it. So there is 15. The question is what comes next. Revolution never right. We need to combine the government to dual power strategy. Dual power refers to popular and solidarity that resists the counteracts of the state apparatus even after the arrival of the left government. The war is necessary both before and after. It's a continuous process about self-managed enterprise. We have to learn from our mistakes. So avoid all mentality, bureaucratic and theoretical laziness. Experimentation enables us to rethink alternatives. It is the only way to continue to say no to surrender to defeat. This means critique alternatives are the necessary counterpart to our affirmative. Affirming dialectics is the only way to challenge state oppression. And nullification would go a long way, destroying state power and the prison industrial complex. Barnett 13. The punishments too hard. Judges to determine the validity of the law. Most incarcerated have been found guilty by the victim. Let's find the U.S. has the highest prison population, multi-billion-dollar prisons. That is why prosecutors rewarded for convictions that lead the individual reduce the issue so long as they harm no others. Never convicted so called crime is defined by the state. Nullification would go a long way, destroying state's power. The state would become infinitely control nonviolent behavior. The prisons would empty, and nullification forces government reform, destroys the prison industrial complex, and opens debate, creating change. Number 11. Laws are effective bound. People should not expect change from Washington. There's evidence sounds up there. People say enough is not one thing. Having nothing right, that thing wrong gives a superficial appearance of it being right. Vote to quit regardless of the evidence, except for acts of violence. No one can be clouded with the government that uses nonviolent drug offenses to fill the prisons. If the people lead, leaders will follow, and prisons are fundamental to and indisputably productive of U.S. globality. It inaugurates and sustains white supremacist genocidal violence. Only Atkins, Salva, Rodriguez, or 7, the bodies in prison within the U.S. disappear from moral registers, new framings of our genealogy of violence specific to prison that can conceptualize domestic warfare and global technology violence. The prison dream is programmatic rather than fleeting. Prison fundamental to U.S. violence across global horizon. Production of state-seeking technology and human domination, form of genocide, war-making, racist violence, and mass imprisonment all over the world. It's essential to have states all over the world are formulating their own responses to crises, and this random approach to politics succeeds. Empirics proves Parliament pursued California's three strikes law. Blind application led to grotesque results, including life imprisonment for a man who started trying to stealing a pizza. Jury's refusal to convict three strikes cases became so common that offices had to change their policies about the types of cases they were prosecuting under the law. Contention to his democracy. A, jury nullification destroys the jury-judge power balance, which resolves biased decisions because judges are corrupt and make biased decisions in order to sustain a good image. Parliamentary reform. Judge and prosecutor often use the power to promote their biases or personal interests. Jury's role is to counterbalance the overzealous judge or prosecutor. Unlike judge and prosecutor, juries don't need to travel crime and insurance re-election or see higher office. Only a jury can value free from institutional pressures that beats at the core of professional. And some people may misuse nullification, but don't give in just yet. Our strategy deters unfair cases from being prosecuted, giving poor people a safe way out. But nullification is like any other democratic power. Some people may try to misuse it, but that does not mean it should be taken away from everyone else. Because prosecutors have discretion over charge of offense, they have more power to throw the book at defendants, compel them to be guilty prosecuitors, bring their cases. They won't have to worry about nullification, knowing how much time they'll have. B, absent jury nullification, democracy becomes tyranny. Only nullification preserves democracy by fostering all those individuals to resistance towards the state. Parliament 5, nullification protects democracy by protecting minorities against majority, ensuring this mechanism not become tools for repression. Absent jury democracy and result in tyranny. Nullification can serve as an ally for expressing opposition to a law while change still forthcoming the political process. Jury is local protection, local communities, jury control procedures, reduce the jury to a tool of federal government to overcome the people. Because nullification constitutionally protected does not subvert the rule of law, it's a product that no more subverts than prosecutorial discretion. Nullification ensures meaningful input and alternative rebellion. The evidence also indicates nullification upholds the rule of law and protects the minority from the majority. Underview. One, policy analysis is the best way to challenge power. Top confident 95. Policy analysis is the best way to challenge power. Discourse on intertextuality, isolating, ignoring conflict, racism, injustice, monitoring on otherness has become substitute for actual engagement. Emphasis on discursive analysis of material circumstance hides working towards concrete goals. Radical enterprise values socioeconomic constraints. 2, lifting biopolitical constraints necessarily creates new ones. The illusion that we can be free from our power makes the impact worse. Shapiro. 7, lifting biopolitical constraints. Analyst Foucault himself states it is impossible to be in a world without power because as soon as the constraints are lifted, another one sets in place. Have the French overthrew the government. Then they had to face new governmental power. As soon as we try to infringe and use power limited, we're only increasing power. 3, presume after overcome 746 times 2. They have more than twice the total time. 4, democracy checks biopolitical impacts. Okay, 97, modern democracy is not capable of genocidal action. Policy of genocidal government turn away from modernity. Modern societies have pluralistic democratic political systems that are also economic pluralism. Is these very attributes of modernity which stand in the way of modern genocides? And is it okay with you to sit down? Right?
Okay, so what impact do you solve for?
Everything in contention 1 and contention 2.
So, like, just tell me what that is.
It's like violence, prison violence. We prevent people from being convicted and going to prison.
So, like, violence is happening right now, right?
Yes.
So do you stop that violence from happening?
No, our argument is that we stop the violence from continuing and transitioning into the prison system.
So you prevent further violence. So what's the...
No, we prevent violence at its core.
Okay, wait, so how? So, like, you nullify... So, basically, you can keep people from going into prisons. What does jury nullification do besides that?
It also leads to spillovers and reforms where governments change their policies.
Okay, what's the warrant for that?
The warrant is that when people are nullifying all of the laws, then the government realizes that the public is trying to send a message here, so we should change the law. I.e., when a lot of people go together and say
where's the
law,
evidence in the AC that shows that enough people will be nullifying laws that relate to the police state?
I mean, our evidence indicates
to spill over. Like, how much nullification do we need to spill over?
I mean, our evidence indicates that as long as people nullify nonviolent crimes, there will inevitably be a spillover. It's not like a question of like there's 97% or 93%. It's like the affirmative would probably lead to it.
Would probably lead.
Yeah, I mean, it's empirically happened before. The 3 strikes law in California.
Okay, so if they're nullifying for nonviolent crimes, then the logical consequence would be like what? Nonviolent crimes are no longer crimes anymore. Like what would happen after that? So, like, if everyone's nullifying nonviolent crimes, it doesn't mean the state collapses, right?
We were not saying the state collapses.
So, like, what is the internal link to stopping the police state, or the policing?
Our argument is that we stop the over-criminalization that is a result from the police state convicting nonviolent criminals who, by the way, aren't actually criminals. They're just trying to make money. The idea behind that is that they're just trying to appeal to, like, the corporate America to get money.
So, like, I still don't think you're answering the question.
Like, what question?
So you say, okay, You break down the police state. What does it mean to break down the police state?
That means
destroy the
you
police
break
state?
down the violence that is a result.
So
of
what?
the
So like
regime.
what break? So like you can say breaking down the violence, but what
We
actually? Like, what does that
change the
entail?
laws.
So
For
the laws.
example-
Okay, so the laws change.
Yeah,
So
and
nullification leads-
spillover is exactly what my
Okay.
response was.
So
the first
nullification.
time.
Okay, so nullification leads to laws changing.
Yeah.
So why does that mean you control the internal link to abolishing prisons and destroying the CJS?
Our evidence indicates that the prisons will empty out when more people reform nonviolent crimes. These people will not be going
So
to
the
prison
prisons-
anymore.
Okay, so
Acquittal
wait.
means that
Why
there's
will
a-
the prisons empty out if there's like 2 million people in there already? Do you do anything to help them?
Well, our evidence indicates that the people that are in there for violent crimes will not be reduced,
Okay.
obviously, because they have actually committed the crime.
Okay, so
Our evidence indicates
So, but-
that
so
there
nonviolent
is steps that
offenders-
is
so-
required into prison abolition.
Okay,
I don't know
so-
if you're probably going to read the prison abolition critique or something like that.
Okay, so
Or
it's
read a
just- so
permutation
it's-
that says that
I
pragmatic policies
don't.
is key.
It's okay. So you have evidence that says the nullification movement empirically succeeds, right? It's like, what's the word for that? You
Yeah,
you
it's,
cite something from California.
Yeah, so the 3 strikes law in California, this one guy, his 3rd strike was that he stole a slice of pizza, and they were going to convict him for his entire life he would spend in prison. People were nullifying this law so much that the governments had to change their policy and got rid of that law.
Do jurors know about jury nullification?
The plan is to jurors know about knowledge jury nullification. The
How does the
plan
plan
has-
lead to jurors?
we inform jurors about process jury nullification. Do you want me to give you the paragraphs that they will say to them?
How do you inform? So it's just like, so when does this implement? Like, when does this implement happen?
We give it to them for non-violent, before non-violent criminal trials. We give them like a paragraph text that says like you can use this.
So like, you defend that nonviolent crimes are not crimes, period, right?
No, our argument is that some non-violent crimes are just obviously bad.
So like, which ones?
I mean,
which ones are obviously
Like,
not
for
crimes?
example, people who have marijuana and are convicted for that. Some non-violent crimes shouldn't be crimes. There might be some non-violent crimes which are bad.
So what do you do about those? Like, how do you delineate what it is and what isn't, right?
It's up to the juror, obviously.
Okay, stop. 43 seconds left.
Can you watch me? Turn me off.
Full off.
I'm gonna- You know, what edit is.
I'm not editing. Like I'm copy pasting everything. It's like you can edit if you want.
How much prep did you have?
43.
Okay, wait, if you're going to copy and paste it as well, I want you to take that.
I mean, I can flash you all into separate docs if you want.
Like, I mean, like, if you should take prep, you can, because I have to, like, do that.
Dude, I didn't want to flash in the first place. Like, come on. Like, this is exactly why I didn't want to flash, because my computer is really bad at formatting. Like, I use pages, so I have to transition everything to Word. Okay, everyone ready?
What was the order again? That might be.
NC3 obviously. Moral statements are intended to be objective truth, but we never know others objectively, meaning any judgments we make are tainted by our own subjective perspectives. Friedrich Nietzsche writes, our experience of another person can never be complete, so we would have total evaluation of all evaluations of premature standards by which we measure our own being are not unalterable. We are subject to fluctuations, yet we would have to know ourselves space to justly accept the relation between ourselves and anything else. An external system of ethics that is attached to the ethical agent makes no sense. We are the only ones who know ourselves, and we are only able to create independent, unique obligations to enforce an obligation under another. We would need to be able to take an outside view, but if we were tainted by subjectivity, that becomes impossible. Therefore, there is no essence of persons, rather each agent creates their own ethical norms and identity in relation to themselves. This means that ethical systems must not be focused on creating sort of universal content including all agents, but rather must be immutable to multiple perspectives. What is good or bad also means that I meet the standard that he sets in his farly evidence, meaning he can't. Farly evidence meaning he can't extend that to exclude this framework. Also, they must be accommodated by multiple perspectives and modes of being. This is the only way to understand morality. One NC recognizes people's roles as creators and subjects of morality as such, and ethical action is one in accordance with an individual subjective evaluation. Denial of that ability to act would thus constitute an unethical decision. Thus, the value criterion is allowing agents to the ability to express their own identities. The negative word is approved that the process during nullification denies the agent's ability to find their own obligation and identities. I contend that affirming forces the static notion of identity upon agents. It precludes the possibility of a fluid ontology, denies the ability of agents to act in a way that expresses themselves. During nullification, instead of judging whether or not an individual is violated the law, normative judgments are made upon the individual, their social status, their political identity, their relation to the law. Empirically, this only paves the way for injustice. Tetlow. Government under enforcement sets a measure of principality of race and gender motivated violence. Minorities, when women learn beating rapes, go unpunished, they learn what behavior would be deemed having asked for it. They seek justice. They learn rules of race and gender code be enforced through violence, protected about jury bias, shaped decisions of law enforcement. Juries refuse to convict police officers of black people or to convict men for sufficiently demurring women prosecutors not bother jury decisions formed. The excuse for enforcement also turns the EC because it means that the injustices that he tries to solve will be infinitely propagated. This negates one. Legal rules require a stable subject on which we can pass a judgment. This is because laws claim the individual is responsible for the actions as such and pay for them. However, if an agent is constantly becoming the notion of personal responsibility, make no sense of punishment, has no bearing anymore. This means the notion of applying law to subjects is irrelevant. 2. Jury nullification requires the jurors find that objective reasons why the law should not be applied in a particular instance. This places limits on identity because it presupposes one to judge whether or not an individual's personal circumstances subjectively require the nullification of the law. This also always argues why affirming allows oppression to stop because when NEC places parameters on what is and isn't a valid reason to nullify in the first place. Crandall and Beasley. Juries nullify a verdict for provides punishment that is discrepant from perceived value defended when juries engage in nullification focus on their attributions of responsibility to nullify the sympathetic defendant's juries that receive nullification instructions spend less time considering evidence and more time to defend characteristic nullifications occur when punishment for the crime is balanced with the value of the defendant. 3. The law never addresses the individual, but rather a proxy entity that can be objectively evaluated by a system of the law by removing the personal characteristics that may agencies themselves. A codified right forecloses the possibility of recognizing the unique nature of each agent, which denies the existential component of ethics. Decide. Jury nullification is causing states to deny people the right to a jury. Whitney. Juries can influence the law through nullification. Repetitive jury nullification clearly states that government we disagree with the right of nullification led prosecutors lobby for laws to take away the jury trial. This is an unintended consequence of jury revolt because instead of reforming the system, lawmakers who respond to this plea take the choice away from the people and put it back in the prosecutor's hands. And states bypass the constitutional right to a trial by setting the punishment before the threshold that triggers the right to a jury. Whitney 2. All states are bound to the Supreme Court decision that assures jury trial in criminal cases where the offender faces possible penalty of at least 6 months of imprisonment. Before the 6-month threshold, state legislatures decide whether criminal defense will be guaranteed a jury trial, right? Even if it's not guaranteed under the Sixth Amendment. And this act turns cases out ways. 1. Repetitive jury nullification causes prosecutors to deny right to the jury by lowering the punishment below the threshold that triggers the right, which means that in the afterworld, more people end up in prison than all of it. Also proves then 2. High probability the right to a jury is uniquely vulnerable. Inadequate checks are lending to the gradual erosion of the right. Whitney 3. The jury trial might be more susceptible to erosion because there's little protection for the right to enforce the rights of the jury trial according to legislation much scrutinize the judicial system after direct check to law enforcement is that disincentivizes prosecutors' predictions on jury trials occurs stand by, offering these less time-consuming road to convictions. Judicial controls are inadequate and causes rights gradual decline. 3. Controls the root cause. Jury nullification causes the state to control faith of minority groups that are policed, which is what allows the affidavit impacts to happen in the first place. Whitney 4. What if crime does not trigger a jury trial? The crime is removed from the community scrutiny and isolated within the courtroom when, within the criminal justice system, the counterbalance to the tyranny of the majority's communities being represented by the jury means that I control the instrument to him being able to access movements in the first place. 4. It's terminal defense of the A65 where they decide there's nobody going to trial in the first place. So nullification never happens. Worst case scenario, it's hugely mitigatory. Next, decide. Increasing jury nullification results in longer trials and mistrials. It overburdens public defenders. Rothingham. Judge would have to give the jury instruction that the defense required, which legal experts said would be almost every time prosecutors, police, and court officials said the bill took the scales of justice too far towards the trend court call systems with more trials, long trials, and mistrials. The bill turned trials and mini referendums on laws. And overburdened defense attorneys hampers effective representation and disproportionately hammers minorities in the prison custody complex of Brown. More than 80% of those charged with felony trial in the public defender system have been plagued by underfunding and excessive caseloads too often. Those who are true, 40% low quality cases, those who have needs paid. All of this state of affairs also leads to absorbing trials delays. 3. Trials detainees in jail year after year before being adjudicated over and completely prepared attorneys were unable to provide effective representation. Those that count to 95% criminal cases and in plea bargaining could also clear racial implications before help the public defense and black people disproportionately caught up to criminal justice system. Implications: A. 95% defense of the absence in most cases don't even go to trial, so there's no chance of nullification. So even if the AF wins all with your impact, it best applies to a few instances of the AF of the 5% of cases that go to trial. Also bolstered by the fact that he only defends nonviolent crimes. Most nonviolent crimes are defended in plea bargains, i.e. ones that actually go to trial with violent crimes, meaning he has less access to solvency. And B is outweighs on magnitude worse. You make it way worse for the 95% of people making plea bargains while making it a little bit better for the very few people that the app applies to. And skip the last off. Go to the AC. First, social nullification movement fails. Martyr. When the jury nullifies in response to social conditions, the jury may be suggesting that there are problems in the criminal justice system. This is the least effective because the jury's message may be difficult to discern. You never know how the criminal takes place. You do not know it's a nullification. You just feel guilty or not guilty. You don't know if they think that it's guilty or not guilty. It means there's no spillover. Also means that you do not know the intentions. It means that there's no way we can break down the police. But it also means that it's terminal defense of the AC because there's no way to spill over to legislation. If we do not know the intentions, the legislation will never know. They will never change the system. And jury nullification allows trials to control the ideological beliefs of jury leading to inconsistent verdicts and encouraging contempt for law and civil unrest. Simpson trial proves cold. Many people who clear regardless of evidence other than glad convicted guilty defended the outcome of trial return primarily on the ideological commitments of particular jurors. Fairness and dictate that criminal prohibition will be the same for everyone who was obviously guilty people would quickly agree contempt with the law because many perceive the OJ Simpson acquittal as a nullification verdict trigger disrespect and guilty racial retention. Also means that the argument that the AC will not spill over to movements because people have contempt for this application of the law. Then juries will act on biases. It's empirically proven. Warshawski. It is not clear that jurors can distinguish between prejudices and justice to recommend jurors to reach a verdict based on their conscience. It's not clear that jurors from using nullification power to express personal prejudice is probably worse than regime that frees jurors from experiencing law and actively encourages them to rely on their conscience and breach the verdict. And 2, studies conclude giving unfettered nullification are more likely to act upon the biases juries give nullification instruction about reach verdicts by because against issues with defendant characteristics related to personal experiences means that a point they will never extend to a movement because the legislators will know it's not their actual opinion, it's just personal biases. Everyone has biases. Yes.
The Cole evidence wasn't in here. The one you believe what you didn't read as well.
The Cole definitely was there.
Okay, can you believe whatever you believe?
Yes, it's just that one. Okay, can you scroll to that? I'll tell you. It's just like that card and that card and that. So, yeah, that. Yeah, the whole heinous, the Mullen trade, and like the implication factor. That 3 is See everything else? Oh, yeah. Cool. You just click the button and then like home screen will show the time.
When I say that the apple is green, is that a statement of expression? Is that a moral statement?
What?
Or I should ought to eat this apple, is that a moral statement?
I should ought to eat this apple is probably a normative statement.
Okay, what is the thesis of this framework?
So my argument is that ethics is implicitly subjective. It's always subjective. Yeah. So my argument is that when you place a certain judgment upon someone, that like closes off their subjectivity and makes it so that they're like an object, right? So it's like
when I say that you are in college, am I closing your subjectivity?
When you say I am in college, sure, that is like a description. That is a factual claim. But
if I say you should go to Chipotle, is it my closing your subjectivity?
Yeah, a little bit.
What's the impact?
So you have totalized me. Like you have precluded my ability. Like
where is the impact evidence in the 1C?
What do you mean?
You said totalizing. Where's the impact totalizing?
So my argument is that
where's the word totalizing in the 1C?
Okay, so maybe I don't use explicitly the word totalizing.
Okay, so how does jury nullification?
So in the NC I use the word denies the agency ability to define their own obligations.
Okay, denies the defendant's ability to define their own obligation? Whose ability is being denied?
So my argument is that these totalizations, I'm just
of who? Totalization of who?
So when the juror totalizes the defendant,
how?
That is an action that is destroying the ability of ethics to become. And my argument is that ethics have to be able to become.
You've made the argument that jurors act on biases. Why is this not inevitable?
What?
You say that totalizing when you make judgments and others, well, you've said that biases will occur regardless. Why is this argument not made?
I just say the act is a morally bad thing.
Wait, so we lead to an increase in that?
This is like a truth.
Okay, what does a good world in the world of your framework look like? Do we just not talk about others?
No, the NC is like, the NC is like saying that the moral obligation of the AF is like a bad one, right? Like I'm kind of confused.
Okay, sure. Talk about the dis side. You say that the people will deny a right to a jury. Has this ever happened?
Huh?
Has this ever happened?
No, but it's going to happen.
And when will it happen?
And it can happen, right? Because if the sentence is under 6 months, you don't need a jury trial. You can go to
Okay, sure. But what about people that do go to trial?
Yeah. So the argument is that prosecutors will intentionally lower.
Government officials will take away the right to a jury.
Right. So, not government officials. It's that the jury stops being relevant because officials can lower the sentence below the threshold at which a jury is required. So you can change the charge to make it so that juries won't be relevant.
Wait, so if someone committed a crime that should have been 1 year, they'll lower it to 4 months?
Yeah.
Where does you have to say that?
So it's the second piece of the analysis.
No, it says below the 6 months threshold, state legislatures will decide whether or not they will be guaranteed a trial right. Reading a line that says that they will change the however long the trial is to make it below 6 months.
Prosecutors will lobby for laws that take away the jury trial. It's an unintended consequence of jury revolt because instead of reforming the system, lawmakers will respond to this to take the choice away from the people.
Take the choice for a jury trial. They did not say that. They did not say that they would decrease the time range. The third recurred off was the work thing. What is it? Why does it leave court off?
Because there's longer trial in this file.
Why? Why?
So, because the instructions that you're talking about, when you tell them what it is, you have to tell them the instructions.
So, the 10 seconds that you tell them what a notification is, it will cost $4.
Right, so, no, it's not just that. Also, I don't think it's 10 seconds.
No, it is. I have a paragraph that says how long or what they say to me.
Okay, sure. So, nullification also works in different ways, right? So, that information system, I think, is a bit longer. And it's also, if the defense requested, so it takes time for, that process to happen.
You didn't read the rule about stuff?
No.
You've conceded the Butler 11 evidence, which indicates that the jurors prosecuted.
Are you asking me a question or repeating?
I was going to ask a question, but. Where's the call evidence?
It's right under, directly under the moderate evidence.
Oh no, wait, it's right there. Okay. What's the argument? What's the argument?
So there's always going to be inconsistent verdicts, and the fact that there are always inconsistent verdicts means that the movement fails and there's contempt for its application of the law. That's fine. So it's like nullification will always result in different convictions or different not convictions of the similar laws, of the same laws. So the argument is that that makes people lose faith in the ability to be like adequately used in our system.
Alright, stop now. 1 minute 22. Order can be AC. AC, then the first off, which was like this stuff. And then the second off, which was denying the right to jury, and then third off. So the same order, like at the same order that he says.
So AC and C is the loss.
Yeah. That's alright. Can we apply for this?
Yeah, definitely. He used that down.
No, I got it. Please make that. Wait, I already have it. Oh, okay. Extend the value of morality is here, minimizing pressure. Extend when only one oppression is better in any framework, which means I get to weigh my impacts into their framework. This is a framing issue that has been conceded in the 1 NC. Extend for LEO7 ethics that can be applied to the real world are unrealistic. We have to start with the world we have, not the world we wish we had. Takes out the entirety of the NC because the NC cannot apply. He says that if I say you should go to Chipotle, that imposes on your subjectivity increased totality. That cannot be applied to the real world because it means that anything should always be rejected if it applies to anything else, which means that we have to you should reject it because it's not real applicable. Our impact is massive suffering, death, millions in prison for nonviolent crimes, voting out this and end to genocide of violence to the prison by stopping incarceration of nonviolent criminals. We endorse that the Supreme Court inform jurors of their nullification matters in context of nonviolent criminal trials. This states innocent people remain incarcerated. That's Parliamentary 07, Whitehead 15, Rodriguez 07. Go to Convention 1, nullification is our demand that we will not wait for justice as disposable bodies are being fed to the prison industrial complex. The plain nullifies unjust government action, frivolous lawsuits, and nonviolent crimes that incarcerate people, which spills over to prison abolition in the long run. That's Friday 13, Numerator 11, and Parliamentary 2 takes out his martyr and cold evidence because our spillover argument is empirically proven to happen to the 3 strikes law in California. They've also conceded that judges overpowered in the status quo. They've used law and made biased decisions to sustain a public image of being hard on crime to get re-elected, which link turns the bias argument. There's only a risk during nullification take away power from the hands of corrupt judges. That's Parliamentary 5 now. They say that it allows it to rest in the ideological belief of jurors and that leads to biases. 1, nullification solves bias. 1, produces discussion about racism in the courtroom that solves in the long run because it combats racism at its root. 2, jury selection process removes overtly racist people, means only people with small internalized racism will get a try. 3, don't evaluate their historical examples. They don't apply to modernity. We aren't who we were before. Make them name one example where nullification failed in the past years. 4, they criticize the status quo. The plan is a shift from the status quo. Only a risk we've solved. 5, nullification can be used to convict. It can only be used to acquit, which means even if one white supremacist is acquitted, we comparatively acquit more black people, which means that we outweigh in magnitude. 6, we've already linked this. Judges are biased, not jurors. Now on the NC first. We allow jurors to embrace their subjectivity because it allows for more deliberation of the self. When you evaluate your injustice, you evaluate the way that you relate to those injustices, which turns the argument that you cannot be attached to an ethical agent. We lead to we break down the bureaucracy. We break down the bureaucracy of discourse because it forces you to engage your own subjectivity in the way that the law relates to crime. Second, lack of nullification creates static bureaucratic judgments because you're just following the regime of the bureaucratic apparatus of the government. You should be able to decide into case-by-case scenarios whether or not it's good or bad. Third, punishments exist, or punishments are bad and are used to check oppression. He says that punishments have no impact. No, we should use punishments to prevent oppression. Also means we have an internal link to follow the evidence to engage with the real world. Next, they looked at subjective reason because they have to value case by case, and also judgment is inevitable, which means we have no impact. Now, on the next, the denied right to jury decide. One, states won't comply. They will not let prosecutors take the right to jury trial away because it's a constitutional amendment, and most conservatives would obviously revolt if people took away the right to jury trial. People would literally be doing Ferguson everywhere. People would be burning everything down. Second, not enough prosecutors will revolt, which means that it won't have enough of an impact. It's never been empirically proven. Third, it would lead to revolution. People would be like freaking out over this. Second, fourth, there's no alternative to juries, which means that it's inevitable. Also, their evidence doesn't indicate that they would that they would remove it before the 6-month period, which means that they don't have an internal like that. Don't like something like that. Now, on the court clog, you said they cannot explain in cross-examination why it leads to court clog. First court, we linked to court clog. We solve because it leads to faster verdicts. No, we do not have to evaluate evidence. If we think that something is unjust, i.e., if they got convicted for marijuana, then we can just acquit. We do not have to look at the evidence and go through that trial. Second, no internal link. They said that the link is that they have to explain nullification. That takes 10 seconds. Doesn't lead to longer trials. Third, it deters unfair trials from being prosecuted in the court. The Butler 11 evidence indicates that prosecutors do not, if prosecutors bring in fair cases, they would not have to worry about nullification, which means that there's going to be less cases going to court because they would not engage it. They would not. You're not going to bring in unfair cases if they know that there's a chance that it can be nullified. We lead to a decrease in cases going to court. Hold them to a warrant in the 2NR if they try to go for this argument. We link to the NC better because repression prevents subjectivity in the first place, which means the affirmative is a prerequisite. Is there an outlet?
There's one on your right. I don't know if that's far. Just kidding.
Top right here.
Oh.
I'm just pointing out like 6 outlets in here.
Okay. The order is going to be NC. The like deny the jury, dissad, court clog, dissad, AC.
NC, jury, dissad, court clog, AC.
You know what? Can I see that back, please? Just want to see it. I'm assuming it's one NC.
No, it's Savant. Savant.
This one, this two.
The cops, yeah. All the cops. Someone else sent you a flash drive? Is your name on it too?
What, really?
I don't know.
There's two cells.
Oh, okay. Everyone ready? Yeah.
I will go for the will go for the NC framework, but you're conceding reasons why the offense from the NC turned the AC. So you can extend the crandall of the evidence saying your notification requires a jurisdiction object reason why the law should not be applied to the particular instance means that you are totalizing, that you are creating a certain conception of what the person is in relation to the law. You have to make assumptions about the person, create a rational category of who that person is and how that person applies to law in your head before you nullify. 100% conceded argument means I have strict legal decision. Then you can extend the argument right under saying the law never addresses the individual, rather a proxy entity that can be objectively evaluated by the system of law means that I control the internally to oppression. The way the police state happens, you say the police state happens, and you solve for oppression. But my argument is that the methodology of oppression of the police state is that they can categorize entities and then oppress them. You have to be able to say this is an entity that can be oppressed. This is something that is going to be policed, and then policed. But you are the one that allows for the precondition of that in the first place. This is a reason why I control the internally to access the AC impacts, even if he's what my framework is false. Sure, that is fine, but your impacts of an oppression are contingent upon the ability to oppress in the first place, which I am controlling. You re-entrench that. No response to the next speech. He is conceding the reasons why I control this. Why I control the internally to his access to his framework. So the NC offense negates. When we make a totalizing assumption about a person, we put it in the rational category. That is exactly what the state does when they are able to criminalize certain bodies. Then go to the dissent. That's like a really easy out. You can vote right there. But then go to the deny jury dissent. Extend the win one evidence saying jury notifications causing states to deny the people right to the jury, and win two evidence saying the states bypass the constitutional right to a jury by sending punishment before the threshold triggers right first. His response is that states won't comply with that is nonsensical because the Constitution only mandates that you have a trial by jury if the sentence is over 6 months. This also takes out his argument about revolution and why Ferguson would happen everywhere because that makes no sense. Then his next argument, because it's not violating the Constitution. The Constitution literally allows you. You can call for the win evidence. It tells you. Then he says there's no alternative to juries. But when it's for under 6 months, you do a bench trial. The prosecutor can decide. Again, you can call for the evidence. It explains explicitly the process of how this happens. I.e., there is an alternative to juries. There is an alternative to juries when the sentence is under 6 months. The last argument that he says is that there's not going to be enough prosecution. But he's conceding the argument for win two. Saying that especially for non-violent crimes. For instance, the win gives the example of marijuana usage. You can control what you charge them with that determines how they're charged. You can you can do a penalty that guarantees a jury trial, a criminal penalty without a jury trial, or decriminalization, which is not an issue. But my emphasis on the criminal penalty without a jury trial. You can deny them right to a jury by controlling the sentence. It depends on what the prosecutor does. My argument is that because prosecutors are scared of nullification, prosecutors will change the charges that they give, meaning there does not have to be a trial by jury. Hold him to the few responses that he made in the last speech. No new implications or cross applications. This is really important because it means that there's no right to jury. He's also conceding every single implication as to why this outweighs in turn the ASOs. You can extend the first one, saying the repetitive jury nullification causes prosecutors deny right to trial jury by lowering the punishment below threshold that triggers rights means that there are no trials by jury in the first place, which means that it's 100% strength of link, 100% defense of the AC because he only defends non-violent crimes. Non-violent crimes are the ones that we can definitely change the sentence to below 6 months. Means that he has no access to solvency. Also, he can see him. He's conceding the win evidence, the win 3 evidence, saying that it's high probability the right to jury is uniquely vulnerable because inadequate checks lead to the gradual erosion of the win. 100% conceded also is a reason why you can refer to the dissent because it means that this right will go away. The right is being eroded. He's conceding the uniqueness evidence means that his responses are so blippy and so short. If I'm winning this dissent, I win. He's also conceding the win 4 evidence that I control the root cause because jury null causes states to control the fate of these minorities, which is what allows the impact to happen in the first place. Means that so he's also conceding the implication that this takes out the fact that movements can happen because there is no faith in the movements whatsoever. Nobody thinks that anything can work because the state has complete control. It means that the police state is furthered and he does not have access to solvency. So then, go to the quote clause just said. I will go for prosecutive evidence, but I'll go for the Brunt evidence saying overburdened public that explicitly tells you how 80% of people in criminal justice rely on public defenders, and that this system is plagued by plea bargains. 95% of criminal cases end in plea bargaining, meaning they never go to trial. He's conceding 95% defense on the AC. He's making a big deal about the impacts of the AC, but he does not. He's conceding arguments as to why 1, the movement fails, meaning he does not collapse the entire system. 2, he cannot get people out of prison, meaning the people in prison will still be suffering. And 3, why 95% of the cases that he's trying to talk about don't even go to trial, means that the offense that he has is super, super low. Any risk of dissent is probably the reason why you're going to be negating. Then go to the martyr evidence. Extend the social group nullification fails when the jury nullifies the response to social conditions. They are suggesting that range of probably determine justice system, but we do not know what they are saying. He's giving an empirical example about California, but there's no reason why they necessarily know. There's no internal link between that and knowing that there is a specific contestation to the law. They might think that they might think this law is stupid, but that is the one A point that is contextual. But the B point, A point that is contextual, but B point that just means that. If you don't know what's going on in the jurors' heads or what's going on in the jury, there's no way that can reflect in a legislative movement. Also, be extremely, extremely skeptical of his example, because his example is very different from the crimes that he's talking about. Current nonviolent crimes are probably more integrated in the system. So it's really simple. You can vote on the NC implicating terms of the AC, because I control the internal the way he accesses his framework via oppression. I'm also winning a lot of defense on the way the AC accesses offense, and risk of decide outweighs unigate.
Number at 1 minute 22.
Stop that.
Can I see the win 14 evidence?
The what?
The win 14 evidence.
There was no. It was like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I see it.
It was 1, 2, 3, 4.
The order is going to be AC, the first, the NC, the deny right to jury decide, and then the court clock decide. Yeah, yes.
Let's say it again.
Oh, same as last time. AC, NC, the jury decide, court clock. Everything good? Extend the value around the standard, minimizing compression, extend winner relating to one. Oppression is bad in any framework, which means that I can weigh my impacts against the realization of the other, except for value of 7. Ethics that can be applied to the real world are unrealistic. We have started with the world we had, not the world we wish we had. Takes out the totalization argument. You can see that totalization is inevitable. When I say you should go to Chipotle, that I am totalizing you. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. Totalization is inevitable, but their argument obviously is in real world. But additionally, extend the world. White had 15, Parmenter 7, Rodriguez 7 evidence, which indicates that nullification allows us to prevent nonviolent criminals from going to the prison industrial complex. I will not be going for the spillover argument, but rather the lives that I saved from going to the prison argument is enough of an impact for you to vote affirmative. They conceded that millions of people are going to the prisons right now for nonviolent criminal trials. Even if that's only 5%, that is still a lot, because the 100% of the United States of America is 300 million, which means 5% is still a lot of trials. We're saving millions of lives. The negative does not do anything for these people, which means that we're still comparatively better. But I'll answer the spillover argument anyway. They say that there's no spillover because they don't know what's going on in the jury. But the point is that if there's a lot of acquittals going on, the government will realize that people obviously don't like the law. It's not a question of whether or not view it as nullification, but rather that people are quitting the law, that they will reform the law as submitted with within the context of the three strikes law. He says my example does not apply, but no, the three strikes law was about nonviolent criminals. I give the example of a person stealing a pizza, got convicted for a lifetime for the entirety of his life. Nullification has solved this and also led to the states reforming this now on the NC. They say totalizing the other because they say that I leave totalizing the other because we have to make assumptions about this. First argument is this is inevitable. We will always make assumptions. They provide this bias argument. They didn't extend it, but biases are inevitable, which means that we will always be making totalizing. Second, it's not real world. That was above. Third, would the affirmative prevent static judgments, which leads to totalization because we say that we should evaluate in a case-by-case scenario, not in a specific bureaucratic apparatus. Fourth, they concede the affirmative is a prerequisite to subjectivity because it prevents people from going to the criminal industrial complex. Fifth, there's no extension of framework, which means totalization is not an impact. Now, they say the police state categorizes people and that they control the internal with the affirmative. One, this is a new argument, not the one is you shouldn't evaluate. A second, gut check. We prevent incarceration, which means that they don't access any of our offense. Third, we prevent categorization because we evaluate scenarios on a case-by-case scenario. Now, on the next side. They say the big voting issue here is that I said that they need a real line that says that the affirmative that they move violent crimes and put it under 6 months. The evidence indicates that the prosecutors will try to get the right to a jury trial removed. Not that it says that they will move it from over 6 months to under 6 months. First, they say it doesn't violate the Constitution. First argument is that perception leads to revolt. As long as people think that the right to a jury trial is going away, then they will revolt. They will not. The states will not. Get rid of the right to a jury trial. Second is, what about all nonviolent crimes over 6 months? They did not solve any of that. They say that they can deny a right to a jury. It's based on the prosecutor's decision. No, they cannot. The argument the negative is making is that it leads to that, but obviously it doesn't. Our evidence indicates that this wouldn't happen. Now, on the court clock, you said they say that the people rely on public defense. In most cases, don't go to trial. 5% is enough. Additionally, we prevent unfair trials. But 11 evidence indicates that less cases we go into trial, which means that we prevent court clock big money issues to resolve violence. They don't. Yeah.
I see rated 2. Actually, whatever. Yeah. Rated 2. Oh. We can do the one that needs a question.
It's both. Yeah. The question. Wouldn't one and two.
Did I do the diss ad good?
Which one?
Okay, never mind. Tell me after. You're close? Yeah, I'm almost finished. Done typing a sentence.
We've seen it.
Everyone needs to move as quickly as possible over you can see. We have awards.
Sorry, what?
When y'all want to catch Joel, see if we have awards. All advancing. Okay. All right. Congratulations on advancing to Octo Finals. Round of applause. It was a 3-0 decision for the
I'll start. I think the extensions of the written one together is sufficient. The 1AR analysis that like this isn't the index of the written evidence don't really seem to like really take issue with the core of what he's saying. I also buy the like DA terms case arguments. It really just isn't enough from the 1AR on the right to jury disadvantage. The arguments that I do have from the 1AR are kind of different in nature. It's even pretty broken. 2NR pretty good. It goes pretty hard for this, and the implications as to why this is pretty awful in terms of the exit framework. IC is a pretty solidly sophisticated. I also expect a really good game on the terms case arguments on the police state stuff, for the subjectivity stuff. I don't know why he didn't end up going to subjectivity. I think I could have been ahead on that as well. Your answers on as to why you don't, I would reject this in the 2A aren't persuasive at all as well. The implication is somehow like this is not in the 1NC also doesn't seem to be sufficient. Frankly, I just think a lot of the 1AR strategy is just like it attempts to cover too much, and in doing so, leaves like very little in terms of some like pure substantive, like not substantive in the big sense, but substantive in like drawn out warrant based type sense. That said, I think there are a couple of places that I could have like potentially seen about going other ways had like maybe the 2NR came a little bit differently. The compression, the like framing arguments at the top of one seem to potentially exclude some of the arguments and the disads. I'm not sure why you make arguments as to why your like framing and how you like contextualize the AC framework would necessarily exclude this stuff. It seems like a lot of the impact analysis with 2NR is like at least like somewhat funding it in terms of how it applies with this compression-based framework in 1AC. So I'm not sure how those impacts necessarily come through in terms of the AC framework, but given that there's no lip service paid to that, I ran some previous on that. Basically, it was just not enough.
Yeah, for me, I think the main reason why I voted night is because of the terms-based arguments that basically excluded the vast majority of your nullification cases, and the fact that your metric said that you're only including non-violent crimes kind of narrowed down your focus and made it harder for you to know.
What about the argument that like the 5% or whatever he cites that our evidence says it's still millions of people?
Well, I think that the fact that because he also mentioned the 6-month rule means that a lot of those cases don't even go to jury. And the fact that most of these are not
Yeah, what about the argument that like what about the cases that are over 6 months?
I don't think you provided statistics for that.
Okay, so what about the standard versus the permanent solves, or the permanent solves everything above 6 months?
I don't think the fact that you only mentioned it like fleetingly and that you didn't really elaborate on it means it's not really substantive argument.
I pretty much agree with him. I vote on the first dissat. I don't know what to call it dissat, but I think that like he's winning that. He's mitigating your solvency with numbers. He's then telling me that he's a risk. There's a risk of a link to the dissat, and even though I think you're challenging fairly effectively, more effectively than perhaps they indicated, but I don't know where they are, but I think a little more effectively because I think he is likely implying something on the cards that isn't there. Like it doesn't directly say that the prosecutors will do this, but it does imply that they could, and there's a risk of it, and he's mitigating your solvency. And so at that point, I give him a risk of a link to the dissat, and then I think that at that point, more people are going to be in jail than out of jail due to your advocacy. I think that to answer one of the questions you talked about, the 5 million people or something like when what you just asked him, I thought that was new weighing in the 2AR. I didn't have that weighing in the 1A. So when you're trying to weigh it there, I didn't think I could really give it to you, and I'm not really sure that the numbers, the math, you're breaking it down is very
Well, like
good.
it's not
Math.
math, it's like what our evidence says, like not 5.
Well, I mean, 5% of the 300 million. It's not 300 million. It's not 5% of 300 million. It's like 5% of 3% of like. I don't think the math you're breaking down is, but like I still thought that was new weighing in the two, even if it was right. I'm just kind of curious what the strategy was of the AC, in that I think when you have this whole thing about critique and duality and the project and everything, and none of it's really extended to get you anywhere in the round. It's not extended to get you out of anything he's doing. You're then stuck with having you make an extension of your framework, and then you go and like kind of belittly, mostly lacking any evidence to try to answer his position. And I think that your analysis, you're a smart kid, your analysis is dead on in certain places, but it's not supported by much evidence. So I'm just kind of curious what the strategy is. I don't understand exactly what I'm supposed to confirm on, what these asks is supposed to be getting you out of, or allowing you.
It was meant for like critique negatives.
Huh?
It was meant for like critique negatives.
And so when you hear policy negative,
well, the policy negative is what.
Well, I usually write critique, so it was like a weird assumption to make.
You took a gamble, and hopefully next time. Anyway, so that okay. Well, I mean, really smart, really sharp. Just not enough, especially given the risk of it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all. Good luck. Yeah.
Real question. I'm gonna awkwardly like.